This is a thing that usually the backend engineers don't like. They don't like this ability of the
Yeah, let me tell you something. The front-end engineers also don't like it.
as an engineer, I believe that the prompt should be part of the code because it can't really.
Joining the pod.
Thanks for hosting me. Pleasure to be here.
Maybe can you give us just a tiny bit background on what's TraceLoop, what's LLM observability, like what's this area you guys are functioning at, and what are you guys doing?
So TraceLoop actually is an observability and evaluation platform for LLM-based applications. And what it means actually, like observability for LLM applications, if you, like our listeners of you or you guys are familiar with general observability, like you deploy some application to production probably, and you want to observe it. And what do you want to achieve by observing your application in production? You want to see that everything is functioning as expected, and usually that you don't have any errors, or what is the quality of operations of your system in production. This is what TraceLoop is actually dealing with, and this is the high-level explanation of the problem we are tackling nowadays.
Obviously, this is a problem that's just going to become more permanent, like more relevant to probably most people listening to this podcast, right? Is that part of the hypothesis you guys are you base your company on?
Yeah, obviously nowadays with LLM applications, if we started with simple applications which was just based on some prompt and a response from a model, I don't know, let's imagine GPT one. Today, the applications are getting much more complex with agentic workflows, RAG pipelines, chatbot, and stuff like that, making everything much more complex to observe and monitor. So nowadays, instead of just one prompt and response, we have like a long chain of prompts and response coupled together in one pipeline, calling also tools which can consist of REST calls, HTTP calls actually to other services, other applications outside, and making everything more complex to observe and monitor.
The level of complexity is just going to keep rising as we progress with the agentic workflows. Why don't we jump a little bit into a little bit of some whiteboarding? Maybe I'll just quickly share here, Skylar. You said you guys are doing on one hand traceability and observability, and on the other hand evaluation. Are you thinking the product is going to be doing both, or more leaning towards one or the other?
The short answer is that the product will be doing both. The longer answer is that we think that in order to do proper evaluation, both offline evaluation at the development stage, you gotta somehow use production data. And we believe you can achieve that data or get that data by tracing your production environment. By the way, we also support and believe in evaluation in real time, like production evaluation. So we do both to sum up.
Okay, cool. So hopefully we have a lot of time to cover all of that. But I think what we want to try to cover today maybe is some of pros and cons, or probably mostly pros, but like what you get out of doing observability. Some considerations, maybe best practices of like what you guys have worked with clients. You've seen people trying to trace their LLMs and see what they're doing. So why don't we jump into I'll just show you, and I just think this is, this could be a good starting point for us. I have my project. I created an agent that is going to, for anyone listening, it's open source, so anyone can reach out on GitHub and find a code. I'll put the link in the show notes. But basically, there's an agent. It's supposed to replace a management consultant, like a McKinsey guy, right? Doing evaluation of a market sizing, and et cetera, et cetera. So I figured out, and actually yesterday I debugged it because there are some tools, and calling those tools needs to happen with parameters. So some of the tools were being called without the necessary parameters. The debugging was messy. I did it with no sort of like observability kind of tool. And if you do this with Cursor, you run into some rabbit holes of working with debug mode set to true, and like it starts creating a mock LLM. Not very fun. And so I asked it, I added in docs, I added your docs, TraceLoops docs. Obviously, like it doesn't have to be only TraceLoops. There are several alternatives. You guys are one of them. But more generally speaking, I asked it, should I use something like that? And what are the benefits, right? And the high level here was, I don't know if that's hallucination or the ground truth. You can tell us, but it says what it provides out of the box is the monitoring and debugging for LLMs, obviously, visibility into LLM calls, vector DB operations, right? So basically, just like high level of observability of what's happening, non-intrusive integration. So you're not really gonna mess up like with my code, right? And like it's basically like a pip install and then like an extra tiny snippet, right, that goes into the code base. Comprehensive tracing, quality monitoring, etc. Maybe even prompt management. Maybe first of all, before we jump into any one of these, is that true or a full hallucination of what might happen in the future?
At this time, actually, it's not an hallucination, like it's totally true. And as you mentioned, you just have to add a single line of code in addition to the import if you use, I don't know, Python or TypeScript, and you get all of the mentioned capabilities. Yeah, so it's true, not hallucination at all.
Okay, that's good to know. And I guess you guys are gonna be framework agnostic because this could be line chain or anything else, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the magic of OpenLLMetry is the fact that we are framework agnostic, model agnostic, vector database agnostic. Like we support all of the, I wouldn't say all, but most of the commonly used libraries if you are developing an LLM based application. And we try to like standardize the telemetry. That's the whole point in general of open telemetry, our, let's say, mother project. So we standardized everything to have like the same standard of telemetry. So you can trace, for example, OpenAI models just like you trace Anthropic ones.
So like basically, you understand like there's gonna be systems and models gonna come out gonna be better every time. Some other model is gonna be better for some other use case, and you're gonna allow this flexibility. So basically, it's like a separation of concerns almost, right?
Exactly. You will see the same
Okay.
telemetry for every model you will be using. Also for frameworks, which makes it a little bit harder because there are a lot of capabilities. For example, of LangChain, which isn't supported by Llama Index and vice versa. Korea is a bit different, but we support everything and try to consolidate the tracing and the schema of the telemetry, trying to consolidate it to the same schema so you won't have any difference while migrating from one to another.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So makes life a little bit easier. So, actually, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about considerations of sort of like what we should consider in terms of how we implement or when we should start thinking about it. Super high level architecture of a possible agent, right? That is so it's being ran through the CLI, but it doesn't really matter. It could be an API or whatever front end you can put on it that calls the LLM. Or the LLM might call. It has its own memory, whatever, and it calls those different tools. And those tools, each one of them could be different. They could call an LLM. They could call. They could have several calls, right? But basically, if we do a little bit of drawing here over here, what part in this flow is being traced? What do you think is more important? What maybe is not as necessary? Obviously, this is hypothetical, but based on your experience.
So what we are tracing and what is usually interesting is the part of the marketing analyst agent, like the gray box, and also the tools below. What we are actually tracing is like the basic functionality everyone is looking for, like is the calls to the LLM. Like what was the prompt, what was the response, in order to understand and see what actually happened in production. We are also looking to see which tools have been called and what was the input to those tools and what was the obviously the return value. Um, what is another thing which is interesting in these terms is seeing like the whole flow. If you've been using some tracing products, even for classic software, then you are used to see the waterfall view. So what you can see out of that waterfall view is the sequence or the chronographic sequence of things and actions that took place during the request. So you will see that some tools have been called parallelly, and the results of each tool were, I don't know, one was X, the other one was Y. Then it got combined in another, I don't know, another step of the agent where he combines the results and do another thing. So you will see the whole sequence of actions that had been that. This is the interesting stuff. Also, the call. I see that you have I guess it's a DB down there. Yeah. So we also trace the calls to the database. I don't know. It is mostly relevant. I wouldn't say mostly relevant in RUG pipeline use cases, also in other use cases. But it's nice to see which, let's say, which vectors or which documents were retrieved from the database. You can then see them used as a context in the next prompt, for example. So actually, every part of the pipeline is somehow interesting, and you
Mm,
can make use of everything just like you do it in classic web applications or distributed applications development.
thanks. So pretty much like this here, it would be like this, like the entire flow. Like you do the A to Z in different levels of documentation, but you do the whole thing.
Exactly.
Okay, super cool. So if we just like for illustration purposes, right? If we do, and I've seen this in TraceLoops, but if you do like a high level of what this waterfall might look like, so we maybe it's something like this, or like given some like CLI input or just like the user query, right, whatever that might be, then if that's here in this case, if that's like the first, let's call it like the first LLM call, right? Then like in a waterfall fashion, you say, well, this whole thing, then it calls like tools, and maybe that's like simultaneously it's calling like 3 tools, so it would be like you would be able to see it, something like that, right? And so you have like the full waterfall traceability of everything.
Exactly. And I don't know, nested below one, for example, you will see its LLM call, but where it's written one, you will see, for example, the name of the tool or the name we are trying of the action we are trying to take. And below there will be the related LLM spans, the vector databases calls and stuff like that.
Awesome. So like there's, how granular would that be? Like if there's like several calls to the DB, would you see several calls? Are you guys like whatever comes back from the DB from that call, are you capturing that? Like, can you give us like a taste of like the granularity level?
Yeah, all of the calls to the DB will be logged, and we are capturing both the query and the return value from the database. Not all of it, to be honest, because there are some constraints both about I don't know, privacy and sensitivity of data, and both on the size of the data. So not everything is being traced, but the relevant stuff is being traced, and you can configure it to avoid values you don't want to see in your observability solution.
Like PII, like personally identified info, and
Exactly.
very cool. So maybe now that we understand where you guys get into the picture, what it looks like, maybe we can think on sort of like what some considerations you would suggest teams that are getting started with working with LLMs in a more production grade level to think about for implementation. This is just the cursor suggestions in terms of like the obviously the ease of setup, privacy, security. We just discussed briefly, maintainability. What do you guys usually see from the teams you work with in terms of concerns or challenges or just considerations?
So I think the first thing which drives you to use TraceLoop is even at the development stages, as you mentioned, you were trying to see and to observe what your agent is really doing, even when you are on your local machine. So TraceLoop provides you the way to do it super seamlessly and without any friction. You just add that line of code. Once you are getting into production, gets even much more interesting because you want to track a lot of parameters. In addition to the tracing or the visual tracing, the sort of logs you just showed before, we provide some metadata metrics, let's say, which everyone who's deploying LLM application to production wanna monitor and observe, like the token usage and the cost and the latency of the calls to, I mean, both the latency of the whole pipeline, but also for specific LLM calls, you want to observe the latency.
Mm.
So we mentioned also the tokens and the cost, the amount of calls to your application. I mean, the request count and stuff
Mm.
like that. So these are all basic metrics which you can observe, monitor, or report by the OpenLLMetry or TraceLoop SDK into your observability.
Okay, that's like basically like if for anyone who wants optimization, maybe that's the word, of their LM usage in prod, this is a really good place to start.
Exactly.
Mhm. Sorry.
To be honest, by the way, not just for optimization. If you are using multiple models in production and you want to be like you want to keep track of the spend on LLMs, if you don't use something like OpenLLMetry and TraceLoop or any other, by the way, observability vendor, you'll just have to go month by month and look at, I don't know, OpenAI usage dashboard and Anthropic usage dashboard. Here you can see all of this aggregated in a single pane of glass, what I like to say in the observability space.
Okay, yeah. So that's I guess you're pretty much lost if you don't do any observability. So great. And basically we touched on it briefly. The setup supposed to be a couple of minutes.
I guess Near, my co-founder and the CEO of TraceLoop, is always bragging on sales calls that we can get you onboarded in 2 minutes during the sales call. We don't need the next meeting of like onboarding and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And then that's what you've actually seen usually with your design partners, the clients you already have.
Yeah. So to achieve this minimal observability, the metrics, metadata and metrics we've just discussed, yeah, it takes actually 2 minutes of installation. You just add that line to your code and then deploy your change to production. Maybe deploying the change to production in your environment will take much more than adding the code of our integration.
Yeah, well, that's always that's not in your court
Yeah,
or it's not something you can help with.
exactly.
But yeah, no, and then what have you seen if we go to like more advanced sort of like cases or sort of like that when that happens, you get the first like step working, it's all good. Have you had feature requests or some work that you have done with clients for more advanced sort of use cases? I just wonder what those could be.
Exactly. Like those metrics and tracing is just the entry point to the TraceLoop platform.
Mhm.
Because if you are if it's not a weekend project, and usually I wouldn't say enterprise customers, but every company which is trying to deploy something to production, then the real concern usually is not the cost of the LLMs or the latency and stuff like that. Of course, these are concerns, but the greater concern is usually the quality and how you monitor the quality of the responses of the LLM based application, which is actually, to be honest, I think this one is the holy grail today of the LLM development space. Everyone is trying, or a lot of companies and startups are trying to tackle this issue. Just like them, TraceLoop is trying to tackle this exact issue, and this is the solution we are providing to our customers, like a way to evaluate the quality of their applications in both in production, both in development stages. So I told you it takes 2 minutes to get going with the basic metrics, but in TraceLoop we have a lot of more complex metrics, and the setup is also, unfortunately, more complex than 2 minutes. So we have a set of metrics. Some of them are quite trivial. Some of them are based on models we develop in-house, and some of them are based on LLM, other LLMs, which are being used as judges, which you can use in production. You can visualize it in TraceLoop, and that way you can monitor the quality of your LLM application.
So is that so really interesting here? I think this probably relates to anyone who's willing to take their product or be confident that their product is at the level they expect it to be. So two thoughts here that I think are important for us to understand is one, you said evaluate the quality of your product, and then I wonder in your eval, like what you usually do in your default, do you do like an overall eval of the output that you define together with the client of what comes out of the tool and the chains running at the end, or do you actually look at specific calls within the right in the waterfall, the main big call, and do eval for all of these, and then put everything together? Maybe we can start with that, and then.
So we do both, and I think it's quite equivalent to the paradigm of testing of regular
Mm.
applications. Like you have unit testing usually, which tests every single granular component of your application, like a method, for example, in classic software development. And you have the integration test or end-to-end test, for example, which relates to the whole flow and the result of the whole flow. So we do both of them. We evaluate both specific LLM calls and also the full, I would say, full result or intermediate result of some pipeline.
So that's, let's say I guess your users are not just engineers, but also if I am a product manager of an LLM based product, or even like a CSM or someone that is communicating the quality of the product to the world, maybe even I can use such a system to understand like the blind spots or what's the average quality or one of those things. Are you thinking about those sort of users as well?
Yeah, we are trying to, even though you got to be focused on some some segment of the crowd, and we mainly focus on developers and data scientists right now. But we did see a lot of usage of I don't know, product managers, sorry, domain experts, customer support even. Yeah, we did see it.
And that's probably going to grow. So yeah, I guess it's like in the roadmap, right? It's in the backlog to maybe create features for those folks as well.
We have some features, by the way, aimed for those audiences, like the prompt management
Mm.
and stuff like that, which is aimed for partially technical users, which are able to evaluate new versions of prompts and even deploy to production. Engineers usually don't like it that the product managers are, you know, have the ability to push new stuff to production, but we see some cases for that.
Just to I want to ask one more question on evals here, but just what you just said to make sure I fully understand it. You allow for in prompt management, you allow not only to just like store prompts and copy paste them from somewhere, but do you have a layer where you let semi-technical users change their changes take effect in prod, regardless of the rest of the code base that the product might have?
Yeah, we have this capability in the platform. Yeah, we are still considering how it should work, because there should be some guardrails, and I'm not talking about guardrails like the term guardrails we are used to in the space of LLMs, but guardrails in terms of how do you limit the ability of semi-technical users to affect production in a way that can cause a lot of harm to the application. This is a thing that usually the backend engineers don't like. They don't like this ability of the.
Yeah, let me tell you something. The front-end engineers also don't like it. Do you have some thoughts on this? Like, don't worry, maybe this is a hot take, but what do you think should be the relationship between product managers changing prompts, pushing those changes to prod, and the rest of the team, or how it should work?
It depends on the day you ask me this question. Like every day, every other day, I have a different opinion about it because part of me believes that product managers, or not product managers, but domain experts within the space the application is dealing with, they know better how to tune the prompt according to a given data set for real world examples. But on the other hand, I believe that the prompt should be part of the, as an engineer, I believe that the prompt should be part of the code because
Mm.
it can't really live outside of the code. It isn't like a CMS where you just put different, like inject different content. It is actually part of the application because the prompt relies on input from the code. For example, if you will expect an argument in the prompt which doesn't exist, like the code does not pass that argument, then your prompt won't work. And also, if your prompt is like outputting some schema of result or some structure of result which the code relies on, and you broke that schema, that structure, then the code will break. So it's hard to see it living outside of the code.
Okay, it's like it's just super intertwined. I guess no model, no LLM would solve the problem of engineers and product managers would have to figure those things out together. I get it. That's super interesting. I can't wait to stress test and try the product a little bit more. Maybe just a little bit. Give us like the sort of like starting point or the directions for what to think about when we get started. You know what to keep in mind. Sort of your tips based on your experience, and then later we will finish with some specific tips and resources.
Always have an observability solution and way to track your LLM application. You need it in order to like evaluate the quality of the outputs, and also, of course, to debug requests and stuff that didn't work as expected. But you gotta see somehow the results. Once you do it in a small scale, it's fine. You don't really need like some complex evaluation system, because this is how we see everyone starting. You can go and see the request, track the request one by one, see what worked, what didn't work. But if you are planning on getting to production at some point, you can achieve probably 60% production readiness just by doing the stuff manually. But if you want to get to production, then you won't be able to go over all of the traces. This approach doesn't scale, and you gotta have some evaluation system set up with relevant metrics to your use case. We didn't discuss it here, like we didn't put a lot of attention and focus to this thing, but there are a lot of methodologies and a lot of articles about how to set up the right evaluation metrics for your application. We deal with it a lot in like in TraceLoop and in our platform. So you gotta have something like that. Once you have a way to assess the quality of your results, you can actually iterate and improve the precision, improve the quality of your result, and then you will be able to get to production.
So don't wait. Start tracking your LLMs from the get go. Right. Start small and simple. Right. And figure out the evil metrics, and maybe I'll add, like, once you figure out your evil metric, then maybe try to stick to them and don't change them every day, so we can actually see the progress. Because that happens sometimes when people keep changing the moving target. Awesome. This is super useful. What what do you sort of like read, consume, or go to when you want to see like where things are at in terms of the resources you follow, when you want to see what's important, where observability is going, or just agents in general, that you would suggest folks would keep an eye on?
I suggest the Eugene Yan.
Mm,
I really like his articles. It can get too deep in terms of technical and but super interesting reads, and I really love his approach to evaluation and to monitoring and stuff like that. Other than Eugene, there are a lot of great guys. The whole like every other every other guy is writing about AI and Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere. So it's really hard to pinpoint and I don't know, mark just some of them. Eugene is my go-to when I wanna read like a good material.
amazing. Yeah, and it's hard to escape the AI sort of like a waterfall of content that is keep pouring on you on Twitter and LinkedIn. So yeah, it's I think this is the second time here Eugene is being suggested as the go-to source of all knowledge in observability and just thinking on LLMs, the like extra step of eval and metrics and so on. So definitely worth checking. Amazing. If anyone wants to reach out to you or TraceLoops, learn more about the product, where is a good place to do that?
If you want to reach me, like LinkedIn is the best option, or even my email. It's gal@traceloop.com. Feel free to reach out. You can also contact us at hi@traceloop.com. You can leave us a message on our landing page. Like, we are quite responsive and response within, I guess, a couple of minutes. We have also our community Slack of open LLMetry. I don't know. This is it.
Amazing. I think we were able to cover quite a bit of ground here. I like how at the end we really get a little piece of wisdom of what you have to teach us right here. Thanks so much for that. I learned quite a bit, and I hope other folks as well. The message to Nation from you seems like don't forget to trace your LLMs and start from day one. And I completely agree with that. And thank you.
Thanks. I had a great time.